She thinks that I'm like psychotic, like literally psychopath, sociopath, something like that.
This is just from him kicking me with his foot and stomping on me while I was on the floor.
I'm trying to figure out why we would have a corporal at the jail that took you out, that dropped and telling us that you said, don't put me in the car with her, I'm going to kill her.
It's important to understand, when you look at this, you see a kid. When I look at him, I see a psychopath.
Catherine drove 2 hours to bring her son home. He'd run away to his grandmother's house and she needed him back before he violated his probation. But 2 hours after she arrived, Colin called 911. He told the operator his mom had tripped during a fight and fallen. He said she was in bad shape. He followed instructions. He did CPR. When officers pulled up, they expected to find a teenager completely falling apart. Instead, they found Colin standing outside, calm and unbothered, while his mother lay inside in a critical condition. The first thing he said to police was that he wanted a lawyer. And here's what makes that so hard to accept. This wasn't the first time someone close to Colin hadn't survived an encounter with him. So how exactly did he get here? Subscribe if you're new. I cover a new case every week and I don't do fluff. And real quick, drop a comment. Where are you watching this from and what time is it? I read every single one. She described what happened in her own words. And just let that sink in, because her account doesn't describe the chaos of a mutual argument getting out of hand. It describes a woman who was hurt in a place where she should have been safe. Something she didn't deserve. Something that clearly wasn't an accident. Words like those don't come from chaos or misunderstanding. They come from something far more calculated and far more deliberate.
Let's see if you're actually emergency. I haven't been in Florida. I don't know the I don't know the secret address. My mom is talking to EMS now. She's bleeding out. Please help. Your mom is doing what? My mom's bleeding out. She's bleeding out. She's bleeding out. She's bleeding from, sir. She's bleeding from the neck, man. She's my mother. Listen carefully. Let her flat on her back on the floor. And when there's anything under her head. I do it. You do it here, right? It's totally away from you. It's away from me. Where's your mother? I'm not over her. I'm trying to save her. Where are you? Where's her? Where are you? Out in the kitchen. In the house.
On Sunday, September 8th, 2024, 17-year-old Colin Griffith called 911 just after 6 in the evening. He was at his grandmother's house in Auburndale, Florida. He told the operator he and his mother had gotten into a serious fight. He claimed his mom, 39-year-old Catherine Griffith, had come at him with a sharp object. Then, according to Colin, in the middle of that confrontation, she tripped, she lost her balance, and she fell. The fall left her in a life-threatening condition. Colin told the operator, "I've had a very, very long fight with my mom," and described her condition in terms that made clear the situation was bad. The 911 operator told Colin to perform CPR and said police were on their way. Colin sounded panicked and followed directions, but he also said his mother's condition had already gotten so bad he didn't think there was anything left to do. The operator kept urging him to continue. At some point during the call, he stopped. Throughout those minutes on the line, Colin went back and forth between panic and confusion. So naturally, when officers arrived on scene, they expected to find a 17-year-old boy who was absolutely beside himself. After all, he'd allegedly just watched something life-threatening happen to his mother right in front of him, but Colin wasn't beside himself. Not even close. He was the complete opposite. He was calm. He was composed. He was collected. He seemed entirely unbothered, even though he had visible signs of what had taken place inside that house, and his mother was still inside in a critical state. His composure, in that moment, was deeply unsettling to every officer standing in front of him. Things got even stranger when police asked Colin directly what had happened. His response was immediate. "I know my rights. I want a lawyer." He wouldn't say another word to law enforcement. He wouldn't give any details about the fight. He wouldn't offer any additional information about what had taken place between him and his mother. He was completely uncooperative. A 17-year-old standing in a house where his mother lay in a critical condition. Police got suspicious fast. He was far too calm. He showed no signs of grief or genuine distress. And if this truly had been a terrible accident, why was his very first instinct to demand an attorney? That's not how a frightened teenager who just witnessed a tragedy normally behaves. That sounds like someone who had thought through this exact moment well in advance. Police canvassed the neighborhood and talked to residents nearby. One neighbor said that roughly 2 hours before Colin placed that 911 call, around 4:30 in the afternoon, she'd watched Colin and his mother arguing outside, and at one point she saw Colin grab his mother by force. That neighbor was Nancy Jones. She told officers exactly how it unfolded. Colin had been at the house alone. His mother, Catherine, arrived at around 4 in the afternoon. Colin came outside to meet her. Nancy watched from her front porch. There were a few words she couldn't make out, and then without warning, he grabbed Catherine and pulled her inside. She described it as forceful and deliberate, and she said Catherine was calling out for him to let her go.
It was really a sad day. They were yelling at one another, and he grabbed her and drug her in the house. And like I said, I don't know what happened on the inside. I really don't. I feel so sad for the mother. I mean, the grandmother. You know, she's a friend of mine, and I feel really, really bad for the whole family.
Colin's grandmother wasn't home that day. She'd been at her other place down in the Florida Keys and hadn't witnessed any of it. But she did tell officers something significant. She was afraid of Colin. She said he had a very troubling past, and that was putting it mildly. Because once the full picture of Colin's history came out, it was very clear why she felt that fear, and very clear why the word troubling barely scratched the surface. This wasn't the first time someone close to Colin hadn't survived an encounter with him. Back on February 14th, 2023, roughly a year and a half before Auburndale, police in Lincoln County, Oklahoma received another 911 call. That call was from Colin. He was 15 years old at the time. He called saying his father, Charles, had been coming at him. Sound familiar? According to Colin, his father cornered him in a room and left him with no way out. So Colin said he had no choice but to reach for something that happened to be within arm's reach nearby. Conveniently within arm's reach, apparently. And what he did next was something that investigators and anyone who hears this story would find deeply difficult to process. Charles didn't survive. When police arrived at the scene, he was already gone. Colin maintained, as he would, that the whole thing had been self-defense. But police weren't convinced. Detailed information about that incident remains limited, but authorities at the time concluded the physical evidence at the scene didn't line up with the story Colin was telling them. Think about that for a moment. Here's the scenario as Colin described it. A father and his teenage son are arguing. The father comes at the boy. He corners him inside a room that just so happens to contain something within easy reach. And the 15-year-old not only reaches for it in the middle of a frantic situation, but uses it twice with fatal results. Not once, twice. And the evidence doesn't match the story. Something about that picture simply doesn't add up. Officers tried to question Colin. The inconsistencies were hard to ignore, but Colin refused to engage. Almost immediately, he asked for a lawyer, retained one, and said nothing further to police. Again, the same pattern, the same silence. Police arrested Colin and placed him in jail. His mother then paid his $50,000 bond and he was released. His release required house arrest, an ankle monitor, and full tracking of his movements. Oklahoma police remained strongly suspicious, but without sufficient evidence to prove otherwise, all charges against Colin were dropped by March of 2023. Shortly after that, he was sent to Port Charlotte, Florida, to live with his mother. This arrangement was complicated. Colin and his mother hadn't really lived together for quite some time. The exact nature of Charles and Catherine's relationship isn't entirely clear, but things Catherine had posted on social media suggested it hadn't been a healthy one. They'd separated around 2019, and that's when Colin went to live with his father in Oklahoma. By most accounts, he had little to no meaningful contact with his mother during those years. The details remain murky, but what Colin eventually shared about his time with his father was deeply disturbing. After his arrest in Oklahoma, Colin told his mother that life with his father had been, in his own words, a living hell. He said Charles had locked him inside the house for over 1,000 days. That confinement allegedly began after Colin came out to his father as gay. His father wouldn't let him go to school, wouldn't let him speak to other people, and wouldn't let him have any semblance of a normal life. He was cut off from the outside world. Basic necessities were withheld. Over time, things between them escalated and eventually crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And as you already know, that situation ended in the most permanent way possible. But when Colin went to live with his mother, things didn't get easier. In some ways, they only grew more complicated. From the outside, it didn't seem that way at all. Catherine posted on Instagram and Facebook often, and while she appeared to have other children in her life, her social media focused almost entirely on Colin. If you were only looking at her profiles, you'd believe they were living a genuinely happy life together. Catherine was always smiling. Her captions were warm and positive. She was also a teacher. In one post, she shared a photo of a note that one of her students had written for her. The note read, "My teacher is very nice, She is always willing to help. She responds to messages very quickly, and she grades very quickly, which I love. She is patient, she listens to your responses clearly, and she helps you if you are in need. And beyond all of that, Catherine and Colin were regularly spending time together out in the world. They went to the beach, they took vacations, went on cruises, visited Disney World, Universal Studios, and even Washington, D.C. You name it, they seemed to be doing it. From the outside, it genuinely looked like a mother and son who had finally found their footing, rebuilding a relationship after years of distance. Catherine even bought Colin a brand new Volkswagen Jetta. She went out of her way at every turn to make his life better, to give him stability, and to be the kind of mother she hadn't been able to be when he was younger. But you already know social media only shows one side. And behind the scenes, things were far rougher than any photograph could suggest. About 7 months after his father died, on September 11th, 2023, a school official called police to conduct a mental health check at Colin and Catherine's home. That morning, Colin had told a school employee that he and his mother had gotten into a serious argument before he left for school. According to Colin, Catherine had told him she was going to end both their lives. She then reportedly told him to take something she owned and use it against her. A police officer went to the house to speak with Catherine directly. She told a very different story. Yes, there had been an argument that morning, but the reason, according to her, was that Colin was failing all of his classes. She'd taken his AirPods as a consequence. Catherine said Colin was furious. She believed he'd made up the whole story to retaliate against her. Whether Colin admitted to lying at any point during that conversation isn't clear. What is clear is that after the officer spoke with Catherine, Colin was Baker Acted. The Baker Act is a Florida law that authorizes emergency mental health services for individuals who may be in crisis. Under that law, a person can be involuntarily admitted to a mental health facility if authorities determine they pose a risk to themselves or to others. Following the police visit, it was determined that Colin met that threshold, and he was taken to a mental health facility, where he remained for several days. During that time, Catherine reached out to multiple mental health facilities across the state, determined to find one that could offer Colin long-term care. Notably, Colin had already been seeing a therapist before any of this unfolded, but at some point during that treatment, Colin threatened the therapist directly, telling her he'd end her life if she ever gave him a diagnosis. Despite that, the therapist proceeded anyway and ultimately diagnosed Colin with PTSD and a personality disorder. Colin was only expected to stay at the initial facility for a short period of time. After 8 days, he was supposed to go home. And then he said something that stopped everyone in the room cold. He said, "I have done it before to my dad. I know I can do it again." Let that sink in for a moment. He had always claimed that what happened with his father was self-defense, but that statement didn't sound like someone quietly reflecting on a desperate moment of survival. It sounded like someone who felt a sense of power over what had happened, like someone who believed they had gotten away with something once and were signaling they could do it again. That's one interpretation. Others might hear it differently, but it was troubling enough that it changed everything about what happened next. Colin didn't go home that day. He was Baker Acted a second time. Eventually, Catherine located a facility closer to their home, and Colin spent approximately 2 months there receiving treatment. At some point during that period, Catherine told someone at the facility, whether it was a therapist, a police officer, or another staff member, isn't entirely clear, "I do not think he can come home. I do not feel safe with him coming home and saying these things." Think about what that means. She was his mother. She had driven across the state searching for facilities that could help him, had given him a car, had taken him on vacations, had done everything she could think of to rebuild what they had lost. And she was afraid to have him inside her own home. But eventually, Colin was sent back home, and things didn't improve. Just 2 months after he was first Baker Acted, in November of 2023, Colin was arrested following a domestic incident at the home. He had physically confronted his mother in a way that left no doubt about what had taken place. Police were called, and when they arrived, in a pattern that was starting to feel familiar, Colin claimed it had all been self-defense.
I got off the phone with Rentis, we sat down and we ate, and she started talking to me about how a bunch of really bad shit. And then when I got up and was like, you can't just do that, and she was telling me to shut up, she hit me in the face, and then I reacted like this. She grabbed onto me, I hit her in the stomach, and then I'm a wrestler. It was just reactive. Grabbed her. She got to the ground. I grabbed the phone. I started recording, and then I left.
So she hit you in the face? Yeah. But we've been through this. You called Rentis because you know you kind of messed up, right?
No, it's because I didn't know who else to call, and I knew that, and I wanted to make sure he knew first off. Okay.
Deputies placed Colin in handcuffs and put him in the back of a patrol car. They then walked over to speak with his mother, Kathy.
Catherine A. Griffith, right? And then 9485?
Yes.
Okay. So I heard EMS is coming to check out your hand. Okay.
And
Let me.
right here, because he kicked me.
Okay. Hey, can I see your hand? Okay.
He kicked the phone out of my hand as I was trying to record it. I was on the ground.
Medics then checked out Kathy Griffith's condition.
It hurts. I mean, you can see how swollen my knuckles are. It's okay. He literally, like, stomped on my hand to get the phone out of my hand.
Can you see the inside of your hand? All right, do you have any pain to your wrist at all? Or is it just right here in the top of your hand?
No, it's
all
from
of this?
Yeah, from here till about here.
Okay, when did that happen?
When he attacked me.
Was that like a couple minutes ago, an hour ago?
Like in the past 20, 30 minutes. And then he takes me here. I have like some redness.
Colin and Catherine weren't the only ones present during that altercation. Colin's grandmother had also witnessed the entire incident, and she was completely clear about what she had seen. As far as she was concerned, what Colin did was not self-defense, not even close.
Colin did not want to come back home.
Okay.
And I said, you don't have a choice. You have to go back home. And he said, no, I want foster care. And even the corporal was saying, foster care isn't going to be good for you. You don't have issues. You have to work on them. And so we agreed. I talked to him all the way. We talked all the way down. And I said, you have got to learn to get your anger under control. You want to be a Marine. People are going to get it. I'm retired from the service. I said,
So am I.
Very good. So I said, people are going to get in your face, and you're going to have to learn to deal with that. You just ignore it.
Right.
And I said, the other thing too is you don't ever hit anybody. You don't even touch somebody, and especially somebody as small as Kathy. That is just something that you cannot ever do. I said that needs to be. He goes, no, but I said there are no buts. So we got here. And Princess had agreed. She's going to lay the law down. You know, that she is the parent. She is doing what she thinks is best for him. That he's not going to have his cellular phone. He's not going to have access because he's like talking to some person on online that we don't even know who this person is.
Okay.
And that she said, I don't want you ever calling me a psychopathic narcissist anymore. I said, and he goes, no, I didn't. He goes, no, I heard you say that. So,
okay.
He just, he had said that in the past. And she said, let me lay this out for you, because the only thing I think you really care about is money. So anytime there's an infraction, I'm going to take that from you. And it'll add up. So you have got to fly right, because otherwise, if not, and then he was doing something with his eyes. I think he wanted the phone. And that's all he was concerned about, was getting
His phone back.
His phone.
So was he upset about getting his phone back, or upset about not going on the cruise and going to get evaluated?
I think both.
Both? Okay.
Yeah.
And was she trying to record him with his own phone, or
Two phones were involved.
there was two phones?
So it was his and hers? Okay.
So she, just to kind of clarify, he's like, let's just do it. Got her phone to start recording. You said next thing you know, they're on the ground. Did you see how they got on the ground?
No.
Okay.
No. I just, because I was trying to call also.
Okay.
So, but I was very worried she was on the ground, and I went in between them.
Deputies moved to take Colin to jail, but before they left, his grandmother had a brief moment to speak with him at the patrol car.
Deputies took Colin to jail, but before they did, his grandma spoke with him at the patrol car.
So, this time, because Colin's grandmother was there to witness what happened, Colin was arrested and charged with domestic assault. That witness made all the difference. Without her presence, this incident might have disappeared into the same pattern of denial and silence that had defined so much of what came before. He was released on bond, placed on juvenile probation, and a no-contact order was put in place between him and his mother. Colin could return home, but any further threatening conduct would revoke his bond and put him back in jail. Before he was released back into his mother's custody, Colin told police plainly that he was not going to get in a car with her. And once again, he said that if he went home, something terrible would happen to his mother. He looked law enforcement in the face and told them exactly what he intended to do. And yet he was still allowed to go home with her despite those explicit, deeply troubling threats. His comments did, however, get him another visit from the police.
Got to get your anger under control, okay? I'm saying prayers for you all the time, Colin. I love you.
Mama, I think my anger's fine. It's just that when someone attacks me, I don't know.
What? I can't hear you. What?
No.
Do you think your anger is fine?
Yes, it's just when someone attacks me, that's how I act.
That didn't happen, though. I was there. I saw it. I saw you stand up. And I said, sit down, and you wouldn't. And you went after the phone. And the next thing I know, she's on the floor. And I'm trying to get in between you all, and I'm trying to call Rennis.
No. She hit me. She grabbed onto me. I beat her, and then I got her to the ground, and then wrestling me, and then I left.
I didn't see that, Colin. I really didn't. All I saw was you on the ground, or her on the ground, and you by her. And you guys fighting for the phone. So how did she get on the ground? Why did you stand up? And why did you say?
Because I was just trying to have a face-to-face conversation.
No, you didn't. You stood up and said, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Yes, you did. I was there.
I was saying, I'm not a psychopath. I'm not this murderer. I'm just trying to peacefully leave or peacefully coexist and just figure something out. And she kept telling me to shut up and shut up. And when I wouldn't shut up, she hit me.
No, that's not what happened, Colin. That's not what happened. You never said you wanted to peacefully coexist.
I've been saying that.
You said that in the car, but not there with her.
Deputies questioned Colin directly about the statements he'd made at the jail. They asked him, "Did you make any statements saying that you were going to?" And he cut them off with a flat, "No, sir." They asked again, "If you got in the car with her?" Again, "No, sir." Just like that, denying everything, calmly and without hesitation.
What's going on, man?
Last night, me and my mom went to a physical altercation. I got arrested for domestic battery, but going in front of a judge today, I have a right to a public defender, and we'll see how that goes.
Okay. So how is the situation with you and mom right now?
Have
things calmed down? Are you guys able to get along? Where are we at?
No, sir. It's not good. She thinks that I beat the shit out of her. I don't. She thinks that I'm like psychotic, like literally psychopath, sociopath, something like that. I don't know exactly where she's at. She thinks I'm going to kill her. I want to kill her, or that I want to beat the shit out of her.
Do you?
No, sir.
Okay.
I don't want to hurt anyone, let alone my mom, even despite this happening. But I'm not going to take what I consider abuse when someone's attacking me. And
how is she attacking you?
When she attacked me. When she threw a punch at me and grabbed onto me, I grabbed onto her back. I got her off of me. She hit the ground, and then I fled and called Rentis, and then he sent someone out.
You called who?
Rentis, Detective Rentis.
Okay.
Did you make any statements saying that you were going to kill your mom if you got in a car with her?
No, sir.
I'm trying to figure out why we would have a corporal at the jail that took you out, that dropped you off with your mom and telling us that you said, "Don't put me in a car with her, I'm going to kill her." What does this all start over? Has this been ongoing forever, or is this all of a sudden happened last night?
For a long time. So I came to live with her after my dad died, and since then, there's just been kind of times when things boil over with her, and she acts out. One time, she pulled a gun on me. I called the cops. I guess I wouldn't believe.
What got her to the point that she's doing these things?
I don't know.
You have no idea. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, she pulls a gun or hit you?
It's because that I'm driving her crazy somehow with the way that I act, and I don't know how I'm acting badly. She talks about school a lot. My grades are fine. I got a 3.7 GPA.
Okay. I mean, obviously you're not, you're a smart enough kid. I get that or whatever, but I mean, obviously it takes two to create this type of environment in this situation, right? And I've heard nothing. You haven't said a word about what's going on, what you're doing, or what is going on to provoke this, or where it's coming from, other than out of the blue, your mom flies off the handle and does this stuff. I'm struggling with that a little bit.
She claims that because I don't help around the house, don't seem to follow rules. The issue for her is that I don't make a schedule. I don't schedule my day. She has ADHD and a lot of other stuff. She was really abused by my dad, from what I know, and that kind of just made it to where she has these very specific things that set her off, these triggers.
So how long ago was your dad back? Sorry to hear that.
7 months.
7 months.
Yeah. He attacked me, my dad, and when he did, he tried to kill me overnight, and then it was in Oklahoma, and he died. So, yeah.
How was that?
I shot him when he tried to kill me.
Did you already have a gun in your hand? Or did you go
I
get
was
one?
fleeing, and the house was filled with guns, 23 to be exact, and
You knew who they were?
I didn't seek one out, I was just trying to run, but when I was cornered and I had nothing else, there was a gun, and just kind of happened.
Why was he trying to kill you?
He's also a bit of a case, but homophobia. If you believe that, the other stuff.
Oh,
Colin was still insisting that everything had been self-defense, but the cops took him away yet again, and before he left, his mother confronted him while he sat in the patrol car.
Told them at the jail that you were going to kill me. Did you say you were going to hurt me? Okay. I heard you say you were worried what was going to happen.
Ma'am.
Yes, they have to go.
Here in the body camera that day, you can hear deputies explaining to the mom why he's being taken away.
But I struggle with a kid that's being released from jail and saying, if you bring me back there, she's going to die.
If we don't do something, then,
Shame on us.
Yeah, then we're not.
Shame on us that
then
we
we
didn't do our
fail.
job and we failed you. And I'm not failing you. Nor am I going to fail your son.
She told him, and we failed. And I'm not failing you, nor am I going to fail your son. She refused to give up, even when every sign was pointing her toward the door. Some time passed. Then, in February of 2024, roughly a year after his father died, Colin ran away from home once again. He and his mother had gotten into an argument about something ordinary. Maybe it was his phone, maybe his AirPods, maybe his grades. The specific trigger barely mattered. What mattered was that this time he got in his car and drove to his grandmother's house in Auburndale, Florida, roughly a 2-hour drive from where he and his mother lived in Port Charlotte. The reason he chose that location was calculated. He knew his grandmother wasn't home. She was staying at her other property in the Florida Keys, which meant Colin would have the entire house to himself. His mother, Catherine, knew exactly where he had gone. She knew. And yet she still reported him missing to Port Charlotte police. His grandmother also called the authorities from the Florida Keys, and she made her position very clear. Even though she wasn't there, she didn't feel safe with Colin at her house. She wanted police to go get him and bring him back. 2 days after Colin ran away, officers found him in Auburndale. He was turned over to the Department of Children and Families, and the plan was to get him back to his mother in Port Charlotte. But before he was handed back over, Colin made serious threatening statements toward his mother again. And this time he added something even more alarming: a clear and deliberate intent to act on those threats by any means necessary. Despite all of that, Colin was still reunited with his mother. So there he was, back home. But the past 12 months had been overwhelming. His father had died, a situation ruled self-defense. There had been multiple police interventions, repeated domestic disturbance calls, and a revolving door of mental health facilities. He was constantly making threats against his mother and others. At certain points, he had even made statements that raised concerns about his own well-being. Months went by after that reunion and things remained rocky. Catherine's social media offered a glimpse into how much she was struggling. At the beginning of September 2024, she posted the following message on Facebook: "I am thankful that no matter what I encounter or experience, I have family, friends, and a community of people who are here to support me, even on the days when I have not been the best me. Thank you to everyone who has helped me see that this life is an adventure worth living and fighting for every day. Life lessons are just those lessons." Then, a few days later, she posted a photo paired with lyrics from the Taylor Swift song "It's Time to Go." Those lyrics read, "That old familiar body ache, the snaps from the same little breaks in your soul. You know when it's time to go. Sometimes giving up is the strong thing." Think about that for a moment. A mother posting those particular words just days before everything fell apart. Then came September 6th. Catherine and Colin got into another argument, this time about chores. Colin wasn't happy. He ran away again, right back to his grandmother's house in Auburndale. His grandmother was down in the Florida Keys again. Colin had the place entirely to himself again. But this wasn't simply a family matter anymore. It was a direct violation of Colin's probation, which stemmed from his arrest back in November of 2023. That probation required him to stay within Charlotte County, where Port Charlotte was located. Leaving the county was a clear breach, and everyone involved knew it. Catherine was trying to give Colin some breathing room. She hoped he would come home on his own terms. But she was also increasingly worried because she understood exactly what the consequences would be if he didn't. On September 7th, she texted him and asked him to come home. He refused. Then, on the morning of September 8th, she sent a message to her neighbor. She wrote, "Hi, if Colin texts you again, please tell him he needs to come home. He's violating his probation," which he was supposed to be off of as of October 6th, 2024. But now he will never be because I'm meeting with his probation officer Monday morning if he doesn't come home by 10 in the morning today. He knows the time and deadline, and he's choosing to skip it and hide out at my mom's house in Polk County, which is a violation. He won't listen. I am going to drive to get him, and if he doesn't get in the car, then Polk County can deal with him. She also texted a second neighbor, "Hey, please do not let Colin or the police into my home. I'm not opening my door, and according to my attorney, they have no authority to make me speak with them or to come into my house. Please don't come down and try to come in because they will try to follow you in if you unlock my door. I'm safe and fine. Colin just hates me, and honestly, I'm tired of this crap." Those messages paint a heartbreaking picture. She was exhausted, frustrated, running on empty, and yet still trying to protect her son, manage the fallout, and hold everything together largely on her own. She was at her wit's end, and she knew it, but she still got in the car. At around 2 in the afternoon, Catherine still couldn't convince Colin to come home, so she did what she felt she had to do. She made the 2-hour drive to Auburndale and arrived there at roughly 4 in the afternoon. And just 2 hours after she arrived, Colin placed that 911 phone call that we talked about at the beginning of this episode.
At about 4:30, witnesses and neighbors see Colin and Mom arguing outside, and Colin grabs his mother by the hair and drags her into the house. Just about 2 hours later, that's when we receive a 911 call where Colin said, "I've had a very, very long fight with Mom, and she fell on a knife and she's bleeding from the neck." Our investigation clearly and unequivocally shows that that circumstance did not occur like that. In fact, he used similar language to when he made the 911 call, 18 or 20 months earlier, when he shot and killed us.
And while Colin's behavior had already raised serious concerns with police, what they found inside the house made them even more suspicious. Remember, Colin had described a massive, chaotic fight. People running through every room of the house, total disorder, everything out of control. But that's not what authorities found when they stepped inside.
We looked inside the house. He said there was a protracted fight, and the home is neat and clean and no evidence of any kind of a large fight or a long fight, as he said.
Inside the house, hardly anything was out of place. The rooms were calm, undisturbed. They did, however, find something in the kitchen that raised immediate questions, a jarring detail in an otherwise composed scene. Nothing else indicated that the chaotic struggle Colin had described had ever taken place. And of course, they also found Catherine. She passed away shortly after the officers arrived. I'm consciously not going to go into the details of what the subsequent examination revealed. The reports are available in public records if you want to research further. What I can tell you is that what investigators documented was entirely inconsistent with Colin's account of events. Not even close. The findings pointed clearly to something that couldn't be explained away as an accident, and investigators were only just beginning to piece together exactly what that story was. To those involved in the investigation, the evidence appeared far more consistent with a deliberate act than with anything accidental. What was documented didn't look like something that happened by chance. It looked intentional and targeted. And the local sheriff didn't hold back when he publicly described what the authorities believed had actually taken place.
It's important to understand, when you look at this, you see a kid. When I look at him, I see a psychopath. I see totally erratic behavior, to the point that he's already, at 17 years of age, shot and killed his father and got away with it, and stabbed his mother in the neck so hard that the knife went all the way through and was to the back of her neck, and she died there. He's being charged with first-degree murder, obviously, and we're asking the state attorney's office, it's their decision, but our state attorney's office is the greatest, to prosecute him as an adult. We've also wrapped back around with the prosecutors, the DA's office, as they call them in Oklahoma. And they said, if we develop information during this investigation that allows them, they will reopen the murder investigation in Oklahoma and potentially charge him out there. But at this time, they did not have sufficient information to charge him with murder. The unfortunate thing was now he's killed 2 people and killed his mother and father, and I can assure you, beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt, based upon his conduct, had he gone to live with his grandmother at the end of this and she crossed him, she would be next. He's violent. He's dangerous. He showed zero remorse when he was being interviewed. In fact, when we attempted the interview, he met the original deputy in the front yard. And he didn't say, Mom's in here, Mom's bleeding to death, Mom needs help. He looked the deputy in the eye and says, I know my rights, I want an attorney. Zero emotion about hurry up, help Mom, she's bleeding, she's got a problem. He is a dangerous human being. And we have him securely locked up, and we are working with the state attorney's office. We're putting the rest of the investigation together. We have began to talk to some of the family, which has confirmed that he is a dangerous person.
So a lot of people now had the same question. How had Colin gotten away with killing his dad the year before?
Do you think the system failed him, that he should have never been out? I mean, after killing his father.
Well, so when you look at this and you see how violent and how dangerous he is, it makes you wonder to what extent and what depth of investigation was done, because they released him from that murder charge that was lodged apparently within a month or so, because they were shipping him to his mother that quick. Now, did they wrap it up in that short period of time, or did they just say, hey, take him home, and notified the family later that we're not going to charge him? I don't know. But it's important to be accountable and responsible for your own actions. My question is, was there anything else that could have been done? Because had Oklahoma been able to act, Catherine would be alive and well today. But because she took him and tried to do like a mother should do and take care of him, she's now dead. Everybody that's special, should be special to him in his life, is dead when they crossed him.
Is there any history of youth?
We're looking through that now to see what his family history there may be.
Sheriff, I noticed he has a charge of violation of no contact order. Who filed that? Who was that?
We're working through the back pages now. Obviously, he's been involved with DCF in Oklahoma, if for no other reason, from the murder. He was involved with DCF here. We've been putting together our criminal case here. We will go through the back pages of him and any other interactions he's had with the system to try to determine everything that we can. But what we know for sure is he's violent and he's dangerous and he'll kill you, because he's done that on 2 occasions.
So naturally, a lot of people now had the very same question burning in their minds. How had Colin managed to walk away from what happened to his father the year before without facing any real consequence? Just 1 week after Catherine's passing, Colin was indicted on the most serious charge available. He was also indicted on kidnapping. And on top of all of that, he was charged with violating his protective order. The state attorney later made an announcement about whether or not they intended to charge Colin as an adult, a decision that would carry enormous weight for the direction of the entire case.
I'm Brian Haas, state attorney for the 10th Judicial Circuit of Florida. The Polk County Grand Jury indicted Colin Griffith on the charge of first-degree murder for the killing of his mother in Auburndale last week. I made the decision to charge this 17-year-old as an adult based upon the egregious facts and circumstances of this case. Charging a minor as an adult is not a decision that I take lightly, but as state attorney, it is my responsibility to do so when warranted. There have been many questions regarding an incident from Oklahoma last year where Colin Griffith killed his father. While I have been informed that charges were not brought in that case, Polk County law enforcement continues to work with the authorities in Oklahoma to be sure they are provided all relevant information and evidence that will allow them to continue to evaluate their case as they deem necessary. The Polk County, Florida murder charge will now move on to an arraignment. My prosecutors and the deputies from the Polk County Sheriff's Office will continue to work together to pursue justice in this case and hold Colin Griffith accountable for his murder.
In the wake of all of this, Lincoln County Police in Oklahoma publicly stated they were willing to take a fresh look at Colin's earlier case, particularly if new evidence emerged to suggest that Charles's passing had not been an accident, not legitimate self-defense, but something cold, deliberate, and premeditated. Colin, meanwhile, was denied bond and remained in custody. After his arrest, he entered a formal plea of not guilty. But before his trial could begin, his attorney filed a motion requesting that any and all information related to his father's passing be kept completely out of the courtroom. They argued that Charles's passing was simply not relevant to the case involving Catherine, no mention of it whatsoever, but buried inside that same motion was something especially noteworthy. Colin's attorneys included what was clearly Colin's own account of events. According to his version, he didn't run away. He claimed that his mother was the one who asked him to leave. He said Catherine told him to go on September 6th, and so, heartbroken and in tears, he called his grandmother to ask if he could come and stay with her, to which she agreed. So, that is what he did. He went to stay at his grandmother's house, and when Catherine eventually came to get him, Colin claimed the two of them got into a serious disagreement. Then, in a claim that raised more than a few eyebrows, he insisted that Catherine was the one responsible for what had happened to herself. The motion stated that Colin called 911 in a state of distress, and to his credit, he did sound upset in that call. However, every single first responder who arrived on the scene reported that Colin appeared to be the exact opposite of distraught. He was calm, he was composed. So what was actually true? Was part of what he showed that night a performance? Was he being dishonest about what happened? The defense had to build some kind of narrative, and that was the one they chose to go with. Colin's trial date was set for January 29th, 2025. In the weeks leading up to that date, the pre-trial hearings became a battleground of their own. Colin's attorneys were working hard to get several of the text messages exchanged between Colin and Catherine excluded from evidence entirely. Lead detective Danny Peters testified at one of those hearings about those messages, explaining why they mattered so much and why there was such a strong push to have them thrown out. He focused specifically on one message. It was a text sent by Catherine on the very day she passed away. In it, she allegedly told Colin that he needed to be home by 10 in the morning or she would release ring camera footage. That footage, according to her message, apparently showed Colin openly admitting to multiple people that what happened to his father was not some spontaneous act of self-defense, but something intentional and covered up from the very start. In another message, Catherine told her own mother something very similar. If Colin didn't come home, she was going to release that footage. And then there was a conversation between Catherine and her father, Robert, in which Robert claimed that he himself had a separate recording where Colin had allegedly confessed to being responsible for his father's death. But here's the thing. Detective Peters testified that investigators hadn't been able to locate any of that evidence. No ring camera footage showing any kind of confession. No recording on Robert's phone where Colin admitted to anything. What investigators did have, however, was a direct statement from Robert himself. Colin's grandfather met with detectives and told them that Colin had personally said he had planned what happened to his father and that it was intentional. That was a significant detail, and it didn't disappear quietly. Just days after Detective Peters testified at the pre-trial hearing, Colin's attorneys moved to have several of those text messages tossed out as evidence. Their argument rested on the claim that Catherine had only found out what she knew by going through Colin's personal messages without his knowledge or permission. Exactly what was in those messages was never made entirely clear, but the defense insisted that Catherine had no legal right to read them in the first place. They argued it was a serious violation of Colin's privacy. And because she may have discovered something damaging in those messages and then shared it with others, the defense wanted all of it thrown out of court. The prosecution pushed back hard. This was not a privacy violation by any reasonable standard. Catherine was Colin's mother. Parents hold a certain level of authority when it comes to monitoring their minor children. This was not an invasion of privacy. This was a mother doing what parents are supposed to do. If a child is a minor living under their parents' roof, the parent has every right to check their communications, especially when there is clear reason for concern. The idea that such a decision could be grounds to throw out evidence entirely is a difficult case to make. At that same hearing, the judge also weighed in on whether the circumstances surrounding Charles's death could be brought up at trial. The event itself might not go entirely unmentioned, but Charles's name specifically should not be used. If the subject came up at all, it would be framed in general terms. Colin had previously been involved in a fatal incident in Oklahoma that he claimed was self-defense, nothing more. No names, no relationship, no surrounding context. The judge also pointed out that even if Colin had been intentionally responsible for his father's death, that fact alone didn't automatically prove he had also been intentionally responsible for his mother's death. The two events were separate, and legally, they had to be treated that way. Now, that reasoning is understandable from a legal standpoint, even if it sits uneasily with common sense. Because the question that naturally comes to mind is this: what if Colin felt genuinely threatened by his mother's ultimatum? What if the fact that she was prepared to release evidence of his alleged confession was precisely what pushed him to act? If she was on the verge of exposing everything, he may have believed that stopping her was the only way to protect himself. The judge acknowledged that logic. He said that if the prosecution could demonstrate that Catherine's threats were actually the motive behind what happened, then the prior fatal incident could be referenced during trial. But ultimately, the judge ruled that Charles's name could not be spoken in the courtroom. Only the bare fact that Colin had previously been involved in a fatal incident could be acknowledged. If anyone violated that ruling and brought up Charles by name, they would face contempt of court charges, and the trial itself would be declared a mistrial. For many observers, and certainly for the prosecution, that felt like a serious blow. The jury would not be given the full picture. That said, there is a legal principle at work here that applies to many cases. Prior crimes or unrelated circumstances are often kept out of trial proceedings because their relevance to the specific charge cannot always be established clearly enough to justify the risk of prejudicing the jury. Colin's trial officially began on January 29, 2025, and it didn't unfold the way most people were expecting. When the trial got underway, the prosecution built their case around two central arguments. First, that Colin had a documented history of deeply concerning behavior. Second, that his relationship with his mother had been troubled and volatile for some time. They argued that on the day Catherine died, Colin carried out an attack against her, leaving her in such a critical condition that when paramedics arrived on the scene, they immediately understood the severity of the situation as catastrophic and life-threatening.
It was a Sunday evening, September 8th of last year, in Auburndale, Florida. And it was at that time that the defendant viciously and savagely unleashed his full fury and hatred towards his mother upon her. When he stabbed her with such force that the knife went shooting through her neck muscles, through her esophagus, through her trachea, through her thyroid cartilage, and shot out the other side of her neck. You will hear and see that as this happened, she began to bleed and bleed profusely through the huge gash in her neck. While she bled, the defendant was there and watched as the blood came out of the huge hole in her neck. You're going to hear that he was there as he watched the blood and the life drain from her body until she took her final breath and was officially dead. You're also going to hear that this was exactly what the defendant meant to do, and that this is exactly what the defendant had thought about doing and had wanted to do for quite some time.
Throughout the trial, the prosecution worked hard to paint a very specific picture of who Colin was as a person. The picture they presented was of an extremely spoiled young man whose mother had constantly indulged his every desire. Catherine had reportedly been buying him nice things for years, fancy vacations, gaming consoles, and what seemed like an endless supply of Starbucks. Colin had never truly wanted for anything, and that, they argued, was precisely the problem. Because whenever Catherine threatened to take any of those comforts away, Colin's reaction was reportedly extreme. The prosecution argued that those moments of threatened loss were enough to make Colin come apart and begin threatening his mother in return. It was a dynamic built on entitlement and deep instability for a very long time. The prosecution also brought in several witnesses to support their claim that Colin had a documented history of troubling conduct. One of the most significant was Deputy Alexander Sharp, the officer who responded to the domestic disturbance call that led to Colin's arrest back in November of 2023. According to Deputy Sharp's testimony, when he arrived on the scene that night, Colin was remarkably calm and composed. Almost too calm. Almost as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened at all. Catherine, by contrast, was visibly shaken and distressed. She had visible signs on her midsection consistent with what she had described. Colin offered a very different account. He insisted that Catherine had been the one to initiate the confrontation and that he had only responded out of self-defense. But Deputy Sharp found that version very difficult to accept. The reason was straightforward. Colin had nothing on him whatsoever, nothing that could support or corroborate what he was claiming had happened. Other witnesses who testified for the prosecution were officers who had worked at the facility where Colin was Baker acted. She also recounted that Colin told her he would rather be in a psychiatric facility, a jail cell, or foster care than continue living with Catherine. The detective described Colin as deeply manipulative. He became furious the moment anyone told him no. Yet he also understood how to present himself to the right people. His grandmother, who frequently brought him gifts during his stay at the facility, consistently saw only the cooperative, agreeable side of Colin. Another witness, Corporal Joella Moore, offered testimony that stood out as one of the most chilling moments of the entire trial. She testified that Colin had once described himself as having two completely distinct personalities. He called them Colin 1 and Colin 2. Colin 1, he explained, was just trying to survive and get through each day as best he could. Colin 2, however, was a completely different story. Colin 2 would do absolutely anything to protect Colin 1, and that included ending his mother's life. Then, on a separate occasion, Corporal Moore recalled Colin, adding that Colin 1 would probably go through with it too. Catherine's father, Colin's grandfather Robert, also took the stand. He testified that he remembered Colin saying on multiple occasions that he intended to cause serious harm to his mother.
Based upon your personal observations, did it appear that the defendant trusted you and would talk to you and confide in you about certain things, grandfather, grandson topics?
Yes.
Did there come a time when the defendant said something to you that was very disturbing to you?
Yes.
Tell the jury about what the defendant said to you.
My grandson was very aggravated at his grandmother and his mother. He said, "I am so tired of these two bitches. I'm disgusted." He said, "My mom, I keep thinking over and over, I want to slit her throat. I want her to bleed out. I want to smell the blood. I want to feel the blood. I want to feel the life and the blood leaving her body."
Now, when he said that, what went through your mind?
I needed to take a deep breath and do what I could to discourage that thought, because thoughts become words, words become actions.
What did you say to him in response?
I said, "Colin, I love you, buddy, but you can't have those kinds of thoughts and focus on them and then speak them, because you will cause them to become reality. Please think positive things about your mom, about yourself, and about a good future together."
Now, at any point, did you warn your daughter about what the defendant was wanting to do to her?
I did, but I did not use the exact words because there was so much malice.
Objection, Judge.
Now, explain to the jury, were you concerned that if you used the exact words the defendant said that he wanted to do to his mom, that might negatively affect their mother-son relationship?
It would, and I was afraid it would actually give her nightmares.
Did you tell her a clean version or a more vanilla version, if you will?
Yes, I did.
What was her response?
That he's been threatening her and he's been threatening Susan multiple times with killing both of them.
The prosecution then brought lead detective Danny Peters to the stand. He walked the courtroom through the Ring camera footage recovered from the morning of September 8th, the day that Catherine passed away. In that footage, Catherine could be seen on the phone with Colin, who had already left the house and was at his grandmother's home at that point.
No, you told me you were calling him. You told me you were going to get your neighbor over there, or I'm sending the police. Do you want the police to go? So you'd rather have the police go? Okay, fine. I'm doing what I need to. I will not take a call from you after this ever again. If Colin's not here by 10 o'clock, I'm dead to you. Do you understand me? Do you understand me? Do you understand me? Do you understand me? Yes or no? I need a yes or no. Yes or no? Do you understand me? Okay. You don't understand. So are you returning home or no?
At the very end of that footage, Catherine left her house and went out to find Colin. It was the last time anyone captured her alive on camera. Detective Peters then read a series of text messages that investigators had extracted from Colin's phone, messages exchanged between Colin and Catherine in the days leading up to that morning. In those messages, Catherine repeatedly threatened to shut down Colin's phone, cancel his car insurance, sell his car outright, and pull him out of school entirely. In one particularly raw message, she wrote, "You said you hated me and I was an evil bitch. My dad is sending me the recording of you planning what you would do to me. Good luck hiring a lawyer." It was a desperate message from a mother who was clearly at the end of her rope. But as the prosecution was careful to point out, Catherine's father never actually sent those recordings, and Catherine herself never followed through on any of those threats. So then it was the defense's turn to present their case. They came out swinging, arguing that the prosecution had built its entire argument on emotion rather than solid, verifiable facts. Their central position was that Catherine was the volatile one in that relationship. She was the one who was manipulative. She was the one who lied. She was the one who had created the chaotic, unstable home environment that Colin had been forced to grow up inside. The defense pushed back on the narrative that Colin had chosen to leave home in September. He hadn't left voluntarily, they argued. Catherine had told him to leave. They also challenged what happened outside his grandmother's home. Their version was that Catherine had driven up and immediately began confronting Colin loudly in front of everyone. To avoid causing a scene, Colin asked her to calm down and guided her inside so they could speak in private. But the neighbor who witnessed that entire altercation directly contradicted that account. She testified that what she observed was not a gentle guiding hand. What the neighbor described was a forceful and alarming interaction, and Catherine could clearly be heard calling out for him to let her go. Now, Catherine's mother also took the stand, and here's where things took a genuinely surprising turn. She testified for the defense. She appeared to be fully in support of Colin, and that was stunning to many people following the case because she had previously made statements expressing serious fear of Colin. There had even been moments earlier in the proceedings where she seemed to challenge his version of events entirely. But now, here she was, speaking on his behalf. There are a few ways to interpret that shift. It's possible she truly believed that Catherine's passing had been accidental, or that events had unfolded in a way that made Colin less culpable than he appeared. But it's equally possible that she was simply a grandmother who had already lost her daughter and couldn't bear the thought of losing her grandson as well. The grief, the guilt, the loyalty, all of it may have been impossible to separate in that moment. And it may have expressed itself as a fierce, desperate protectiveness toward the only family she had left. In her testimony, she described Catherine as deeply unpredictable, someone who would randomly cut off family members and who had troubled relationships with most of the people in her life. She revealed that Catherine had been Baker-acted more than once and had serious mental health crises that required outside intervention. She also claimed that Catherine frequently lied and accused her of once fabricating a serious and damaging allegation. On top of that, she testified that she had personally witnessed Catherine place Colin in a deeply troubling situation involving an object that should never have been used that way, with instructions that crossed every imaginable boundary. She also described Catherine subjecting Colin to physical discipline that went far beyond any reasonable standard. Yet, even within that same testimony, she offered details that seemed to point in a very different direction. She acknowledged that Colin had once taken a concerning item from her home, and on that very same day, Catherine had called her frightened and clearly upset, telling her that she was scared of what Colin might do. She also recounted an evening when all three of them went out to dinner together, and Catherine casually mentioned she was considering taking away Colin's gaming console. Colin's response was to try to provoke a confrontation right there at the restaurant table. He was practically challenging her in front of other diners, in a public setting, with no hesitation whatsoever. It painted a picture of a relationship that had long been deeply troubled on multiple levels, one where perhaps both mother and son had been trapped in cycles of anger, provocation, and escalation for far longer than anyone around them had been willing to acknowledge. Then came what may have been the most jaw-dropping development of the defense's entire case. The defense introduced the theory that Catherine's passing had actually been an intentional act on her own part. They called it, in their own words, homicide by son. Their argument was that yes, Colin and Catherine had gotten into a confrontation, but it was Catherine who reached for an object first. And according to the defense, she did it with full awareness of exactly what she was setting in motion. She wasn't acting out of fear, she was acting out of cold calculation. The defense claimed that Catherine understood her own patterns of manipulation and knew precisely how to push Colin beyond his breaking point. She wanted to provoke a confrontation. She wanted it to escalate to the point where it turned fatal, and she wanted Colin to be the one left standing over her, appearing guilty, taking the fall for her death. Whether or not that argument was persuasive to the jury is a question the verdict answered with complete clarity. The foreperson stood and delivered the decision. There are no defects nor omissions in the verdict. Counsel for the state, counsel for the defendant, rise and hearken to the verdict. Mr. Griffith, rise and hearken to the verdict.
And you lied to me while we were here. I said, do you have him? You said no, and I don't know where he is. You said that to me. Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you still don't have eyes on him. He's talked to you. No, he's already talked to you because I can see where you guys have been talking. So if he's not here by 10 o'clock, I'm sending the cops. Oh, it is. It is. We're all losing our jobs, and he's losing everything. That's why I signed the car over to myself. I need the money. So I'm taking the car. I'm taking everything. So I'm about to go up there and go and get the car because the car is mine. I have it in my name, the mobile notary name. I don't have to send you copies. I already sent you the title. I already sent you a picture of the title, and you already saw what it looked like. So I'm not going to sit here. Okay, then you need to go back through the pictures because you also said you don't have the pink picture that shows it. You also said that you don't show the call records and that you believe Colin, even though he's there at your house. So you're illegally the law. Tell him for house that he has to go back home. Is that correct? No. I'm asking you a specific question. Have you told him he needs to go back to this house? No. Did you tell him he needs to be back home to this house by 10 a.m.? And he needs to vacate your house and he does not have permission to be at your home. He completely blocked me and he's completely removed himself from his Apple ID so that he cannot be tracked. So, right on that. No, his phone is off. His phone is off now. I told you that. I said if he didn't get in the car and come home, that was what was going to happen. And you said I will make sure he is there by 10 a.m. I told you I was going to if you didn't do this. No, that's not what I said. His phone is still on right now. His service is working. He's not going to answer. He's not going to answer. I showed you. Oh, stop. Will you listen to me? Do you see the call log? He did not try to call Monique at all yesterday. He is lying to you. I sent you his entire call log. That's from AT&T. That's not from his iCloud account. That's from AT&T. That's not what the court order said. It said he specifically has to leave a voicemail. But it doesn't matter because if he doesn't, that's fine. But I'm telling you right now, I have held everybody off. I said it's a private family matter. I'm sure he'll be back home. And everybody said, we'll give him 24 hours. That is until 10 o'clock today, Mom. That's why I said he had until 10 a.m. today. Mom, it doesn't matter. Ben gave me until 10 a.m. The police. They said, I need my fucking computer. And I said, fine, come and get it. I told him to be back after work. It's on the camera. I don't give a shit. I don't give a Did I tell you to let him stay at your house? ever again. Not without my consent. And I have not consented. Do you hear me? Yes, Colin. Answer to me. Answer me. Do you understand that you do not have my consent to have Colin? Do you understand that? No, answer my question. Do you understand? No, I didn't. I never threw him out, and it's on the ring camera. Never threw him out. Never threw him out.
As to the defendant in this case, as to count 1, the defendant is not guilty. As to count 2, the defendant is not guilty. So say we all, this 5th day of February, 2025. That is right. The whole homicide by son argument, the defense strategy that so many people found hard to believe, it actually worked. The trial ended on February 4th, and by February 5th, 2025, the jury returned their verdict. Colin Griffith, not guilty. Not guilty on all charges.
There are no defects nor omissions in the verdict. Counsel for the state, counsel for the defendant, rise and hearken to the verdict. Mr. Griffith, rise and hearken to the verdict.
State of Florida versus Colin Griffin. With the jury found as follows. As to the defendant in this case, the defendant, as to count 1, the defendant is not guilty. As to count 2, the defendant is not guilty. So say we all, this 5th day of February, 2025.
Now, when this verdict came in, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. People were outraged. And honestly, in all the time spent following this case and reading through commentary, responses, and statements from people across the country, not a single voice emerged saying they believed the jury got it right. Not one. The reaction was complete shock, total disbelief, the kind of stunned silence that turns quickly into fury. The general consensus, and this was especially pointed given the location where it all unfolded, was that this felt like Casey Anthony all over again. People were dumbfounded. They kept asking the same question over and over. What is happening in Florida? How could any jury, presented with all of that evidence, walk away convinced that this young man was not guilty? Some people went even further. They started predicting what comes next. Because here is the reality of the situation. Colin is only 17 years old. Both of his parents are now gone, and by most reasonable assumptions, he was going to go live with his grandmother. So what happens when she tries to set rules? What happens when she takes away his phone, limits his freedom, or simply refuses to let him run that household the way he wants? What happens then? In the opinion of many people following this case closely, this young man is clearly troubled. He has deep, documented issues. You don't simply lose 2 parents in a matter of roughly a year and a half through coincidence. That is not how life works. And people were particularly outraged over the fact that the jury was never told about what happened to Colin's father. The jury had no idea that roughly a year and a half before his mother's death, Colin's father had also died in what Colin himself described as self-defense. Many people believe that if that information had been available to the jury, it would have changed everything. Maybe that is precisely why it was excluded. But anyone who served on that jury and has since learned the full story, including the father's death, must be sitting with a very uncomfortable feeling. What did we just do? Did we make the right call? Did we just allow someone dangerous to walk free? Even Grady Judd, the sheriff of Polk County, where all of this took place, released a public statement expressing his disbelief. His words were direct and sobering. He stated that the detectives firmly believed Colin Griffith had been responsible for his mother's death. The jury determined that they could not convict him beyond and to the exclusion of all reasonable doubt. But during the investigation, those same detectives uncovered witnesses who believed Colin had also been responsible for his father's death in Oklahoma. And that investigation, the sheriff made clear, was still ongoing. So as soon as the verdict came down, there was an urgent need to address it, because personally, this verdict was wrong. Profoundly, deeply wrong. This is a young man who had been diagnosed with PTSD and a personality disorder. This is someone who, by his own admission to a therapist, described himself as having 2 separate versions, Colin 1 and Colin 2. He said that himself to a mental health professional with his own words. This is also someone who, in the months following his father's death, made documented threats against his mother over and over again. Not rumors, documented. There were Baker Act filings. There was a paper trail stretching across months, and somehow, the jury still concluded that none of it was enough. The circumstances surrounding his mother's death are important to understand. Colin had been staying at his grandmother's house. His mother came to pick him up specifically so that he would not violate the terms of his probation. That was the reason she made that trip. She was his mother. He was 17 years old, and she had every right to bring her son home. But he was angry. He no longer had that house to himself. His mother was trying to impose rules to hold him accountable to be a parent. A confrontation broke out. And then, I'm not going to describe what the prosecution argued happened next. What I can say is that, according to the evidence in the investigation, the outcome was fatal. And then he claimed self-defense. Again. Now, to be clear, this represents opinion and commentary based on what was presented publicly throughout the proceedings. He has been found not guilty in a court of law. That verdict stands. But many people, including those who followed every moment of this trial, do not believe that justice was served here. This echoes some of the most controversial verdicts in modern American legal history. When a jury finds someone not guilty and the public watches with complete incomprehension, it leaves a mark. Just like the Casey Anthony verdict. Just like the O.J. Simpson verdict. These moments erode faith in the system, and the frustration runs deep. Because when someone walks free, the natural and terrifying question becomes, who is next? If Colin truly did what many believe he did, and he did it twice before the age of 18, then he has every reason to feel untouchable. He has reason to believe the system cannot reach him. And that is a deeply unsettling thought to hold. Many people's honest fear, one they voice reluctantly, is that his grandmother may be the next person in danger. If he moves in with her and she pushes back, refuses to give him complete freedom, or simply stands between him and whatever he wants next, what happens? And there is another scenario worth considering. If Colin ends up as a beneficiary of any inheritance, through his parents' deaths and eventually through his grandmother's estate, does financial motive become a factor as well? These are uncomfortable questions. But they are questions that people are genuinely and publicly asking. And in the gut of everyone who has watched this case unfold from the beginning, the feeling is the same. We have not heard the last of Colin Griffith, and that is a terrifying thought to sit with. Throughout the entire trial, watching it on court TV every single day, the disbelief only grew as the proceedings moved forward. And when the verdict was finally read aloud and the camera caught the expression on Colin's face, it said everything, a quiet smirk. A 17-year-old who, in the view of many, had just walked away from 2 deaths and seemed to know exactly what he had gotten away with. 2 separate incidents, 2 separate losses of life, 2 separate times the justice system had to evaluate what happened, and at least for his mother's death, the jury's answer was not guilty. The one remaining hope is that the ongoing investigation into his father's death in Oklahoma will eventually result in charges being filed. Because technically, Colin was never found not guilty in that case. He was simply never formally charged, so that door is still open. There is still a chance that accountability will come, and perhaps that will serve as at least some measure of justice for his mother as well. But for now, the only honest thing to do is wait and see how this unfolds. This is not about shaming any individual juror. The justice system is a system worth believing in, but systems are run by human beings, and human beings make mistakes. And in this case, the feeling is hard to shake. They did not get it right. The only sincere hope is that his grandmother stays safe, that nothing happens to her, that the fear so many people are quietly carrying right now turns out to be completely, entirely wrong. We will see.
That found him not guilty today, made up of 1 man. The rest of them were women. Both Griffith's grandmother and aunt were in the courtroom today, and they both were supportive of him, guys. They supported him.
Catherine drove 2 hours to bring her son home. She was exhausted, she was scared, and she went anyway, because that is what she kept doing, right up until she couldn't anymore. The jury said not guilty. A lot of people are still waiting for that to make sense. What strikes me most isn't the verdict itself. It's the paper trail that existed before any of this happened. The Baker Acts, the recorded threats, the documented statements. Systems existed that were supposed to catch exactly this kind of escalation, and they didn't. So the question worth sitting with is, at what point does a pattern become undeniable enough to actually change an outcome? And if the jury had known everything, all of it, including Oklahoma, does this trial end the same way? I don't think most people believe it does. Last thing, if you're following cases where the legal system and public perception land in completely different places, subscribe. I cover the details that don't make the headline. Next video, we're looking at another case where someone's past followed them into a courtroom, and this time, the result was very different.